Good morning, friends. Welcome back once again to Stories with Pastor Macy. Today we are finishing up the book Woof Finds Family. We split it into 3 parts because it's kind of a long one. So just to review what has happened so far, Mark and Chrissy Peterson were watching out the window one rainy day, and they saw a stray dog get kicked by a man in a black trench coat. And they ran out and rescued the dog and begged their mom, "Can we keep him? Can we keep him?" And she said that they could give him a bath and keep him until Saturday night over the weekend. So they gave him a bath. They named him Woof because that's what he said when they asked what he wanted his name to be. But Woof caused some problems. They were going to keep him over the weekend and try and find him a good home. But Woof ran inside from the garage and he knocked over an antique vase. And the kids prayed that Jesus would help them find Woof a home and that he wouldn't have to go to the pound. And then after they finished chores on Friday, Mark loaded Woof into his wagon and started asking their neighbors and friends if they wanted a dog. And in that process, Mark stopped to play baseball with his friends, and a baseball went into the middle of the road, and Mark didn't see a car coming around the corner, and Mark almost got hit by the car, but Woof pushed him out of the way, and Woof got hit by the car. So that is where we left off yesterday. Mrs. Peterson hurriedly telephoned her husband to explain what had happened. Mr. Peterson soon arrived and put Woof in the back seat of their car. The family drove in silence to the local animal hospital. Dr. Wilcox, the veterinarian, came out to the car and carried Woof into his inner office. Before closing the door, he told Chrissy and Mark, "I'll do the best I can. Welcome, Vio and Dee and Carrie." The 2 children nodded appreciatively, but they were worried. Outside, a storm was gathering. The thunder sounded like an echo of what was taking place inside Chrissy and Mark's pounding hearts. Their tears joined with the rain that had begun to fall. Hours passed as they sat facing the big white door, waiting and waiting. Finally, Chrissy turned to Mark. "Maybe we should pray," she said. "Yes," answered Mark. They each closed their eyes and asked Jesus not to let the dog die. The big clock on the wall struck 7 o'clock. Finally, the vet returned, closing the door behind him. Mr. Peterson asked, "How is he?" "Well, your dog has a broken leg and some internal injuries. However, the damage is not serious enough to take his life. But I really believe Woof is dying. I just don't understand it. It's almost like he doesn't want to live." The veterinarian paused. Chrissy broke the silence. "I know why he doesn't want to live. He doesn't think he's loved. A dog needs love just like people do." "You're right about that," said the veterinarian. "Doctor, can we see him?" asked Mark. "Of course, come in," replied Dr. Wilcox. They entered the small room where Woof lay on the table, whimpering softly. Chrissy and Mark rushed to him. They gave him gentle hugs and stroked his fur. Mark turned to his parents, who were watching their children lovingly. "Chrissy's right," he said. "No wonder Woof doesn't want to get well, Dad. Maybe he knows he has no place to go. Maybe he understands he will be taken to the pound if he lives." The corners of Mr. Peterson's mouth turned upward into a slight smile. "How could I send a dog to the pound that saved the life of my son?" Mr. Peterson asked. "No, sir. If this mutt lives, he is our dog for the rest of his life." Chrissy and Mark squealed with delight. Could it really be true? They laughed and jumped, thanking their mother and father. No one knew if Woof understood their happiness, but his little tail wagged just a bit, as he rolled his big brown eyes toward them. "Oh, Woof," said Chrissy, "you just have to get well." "Let's go home and get some rest now," their father laughed, "or else we'll be spending time in the people hospital." The next morning after breakfast, the Petersons received a call from Dr. Wilcox. The children listened closely as their mother talked on the phone. After a short conversation, Mrs. Peterson hung up. Her face glowed as she said, "Woof is much better. Dr. Wilcox said we should be able to bring him home tomorrow afternoon." The children had never been so excited. "Wait," Mrs. Peterson said firmly, "didn't you ask God for something?" Then she quoted a verse of scripture from memory. "Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs, and don't forget to thank him for his answers." "Welcome, Marilyn." Chrissy and Mark knelt down by the kitchen chairs and thanked the Lord for hearing their prayers and saving their dog. It was a miracle. The next afternoon, when Mr. Peterson came home from work, the happy family went to the small animal hospital. When they arrived, Woof was happy to see them. He was very sore and had a cast on his hind leg, but his tail was not injured. It thrashed back and forth vigorously. That evening, Chrissy helped Mother cook dinner, and Mark sat down beside Woof, who was lying on his blanket. Neither of the children thought to ask what their father was doing in the garage, or what was causing all the noise. After supper, when the children were ready for bed, Mr. Peterson picked up Woof and asked his family to come outside. There stood a beautiful redwood doghouse. Above the door was a little sign that read, "Woof, our special hero." The end. I hope you have enjoyed the story Woof Finds a Family over the past few days. It's one of my favorites. And I promised you at the beginning that I would tell you a story about a miracle, a time that I believe my angels were watching over me, that had to do with the Woof cassette tapes I grew up with. So, for those of you who are too young to remember what a cassette tape is, it's kind of shaped like this, and it has two holes in the side, and it has two sides. So like a CD, you put a CD in the player and it just plays the whole CD. Well, a tape, you play one side and then you have to flip it over to continue the story on the other side. So I grew up not with the Woof books, but with the Woof cassette tapes. And one day I was in the back seat of my mother's big red Buick. I was in my booster seat, and we were living in California. So I was 4 or 5 years old, and she had left the car running. She was just running in the house to grab her shopping list or grab something she'd forgotten, and she was going to come right back out and we were going to go. So I'm sitting in the back seat, the Woof tape is in the cassette player playing, and my mom gets a phone call. So this was before we had cell phones. So she picked up the phone that was on the wall, and she was taking a phone call before she came back out to the car. So it was taking her a little longer than she anticipated to come out to the car. And what happened was the cassette tape with the Woof story on it finished that side. So I climbed from the back seat into the front seat to flip over the cassette so I could finish my story. But the car was still running so that the cassette player would work. And as I climbed over the bench seat in the Buick, I grabbed at something to help pull myself over. And I was too little to know, but what I had pulled at was the gear shift. So the car was in park and it couldn't move. But I shifted it into neutral, and we lived on a hill. So our driveway kind of sloped down, and then there was a busy road that ran right like this, and it was a blind corner. And it was a very busy road at that time. And so I didn't know what I had done. I was afraid. I knew that the car was starting to move. I climbed back into the back seat, back into my booster seat, strapped myself in. I remember being very afraid and starting to cry. And my mom came running out the door just in time to see her car going down the driveway with her daughter in it across the busy street right by that blind corner. And there were lots of big trucks and big cars that would come around that blind corner really fast up the hill. But I think that my angels held those cars back because the car I was in went down our driveway, it went across the street, and it lodged in the neighbor's decorative oriental fence. They had been missionaries for many years in Asia, and they had a beautiful fence that had like rice paper, and it lit up at night, and it was gorgeous. Well, my father spent the whole next summer rebuilding that fence that I had inadvertently backed the car into. But I was safe. And I truly believe that Jesus sent his angels to keep me safe so that I wasn't hit by a car. That would have been really bad. So whenever I think of the Woof story, I remember that Woof was there to save Mark Peterson, to push him out of the way of a car. But I also think about the fact that Jesus sends us angels to protect us in our daily life. And I think about that story of me pulling that gear shift into neutral, trying to turn over my Woof cassette tape. So I hope that you are well and that you're staying safe at home. And I just want to encourage you that wherever you go, right now is kind of a scary time, but not just now, but always. Jesus sends your angels to protect you. And you can always thank him for that. Or if you're really scared, you can always pray and ask him to send extra angels too. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.